Hello, everyone. Welcome to our May webinar for ZAPP. My name is Justine Chappell, Communications and Marketing Manager. In today's webinar, I'm going to be going over how to navigate legal agreements, refund policies, and payment disputes. I know this isn't the most enjoyable topic for some, especially for creative types like most of us probably are, but this is an important topic to address in efforts to create a smooth application and event process for all. I'll be talking about these things mostly at a high, broad level, kind of just an overview to help set a foundation for events who may be newer or those who may have not had much experience in this area of event administration. That said, I plan to get into the nitty-gritty part and the details of the payment dispute process that ZAPP has in place, just to help anyone understand the level that we take in it and understand how to prevent and address payment disputes. We'll start by understanding the basics of legal agreements and refund policies. So starting with the importance of having a legal agreement and refund policy. First, this helps with clarity and transparency. A legal agreement and refund policy provide clear guidelines and expectations for both the event organizers and attendees. It ensures transparency in the terms of sales, entry requirements, liability limitations, intellectual property rights, and other relevant terms. This also helps with risk mitigation. So we'll talk a little bit about how I'm differentiating a legal agreement in terms of, the rules and terms to apply on ZAPP versus the rules and terms to participate in the event itself. For now, a legal agreement does help protect the event organizers from various risks and liabilities. It can help disclaimers. It can include disclaimers, waivers, indemnification clauses that limit the organizer's liability in case of accidents or damages occurring during the event. And it's also important for dispute resolution. So it provides a framework for resolving disputes that may arise between event organizers and attendees or artists. It can outline the process for mediation, arbitration, or litigation, which provides a fair and efficient means of resolving conflicts. Having a structured dispute resolution mechanism promotes a sense of fairness and can save both parties time and expenses. Then we also have, customer confidence and trust, or, I might interchange customer a lot with artists, but in the case, we'll be talking a lot more about, artists. But a clear and fair refund policy, for example, instills confidence in attendees and artists, demonstrating that event organizers prioritize artist satisfaction. When potential attendees see a transparent refund policies, they're most likely to trust the event and feel comfortable purchasing products or participating. This then fosters positive relationships and encourages repeat participation. And then lastly, it's important to have legal agreements and refund policies for legal compliance reasons. Depending on the jurisdiction and where you are, certain requirements might be needed to address consumer protection laws. So having legally sound agreements and refund policies ensure compliance with relevant laws and regulations, which helps protect you from legal consequences. So again, we're kind of just speaking at a broad term because I know a lot of events are different and they have different things they need to include. Also, you might be creating a legal agreement that includes or does not include the actual participation in the event itself. So for the following section about key elements to include, I'm going to be talking about, rules and terms to apply. Some of them might also apply to participation, just barely, but these are some things that I think are important to include in the rules and terms to apply to the show versus, the contract for those attending the festival. So make sure you're including event details and requirements, keeping everything clear about the timeline for things, location for things, and key dates. Make sure you have application process and fee information. How much will the artist be spending to participate in the event? What's the application process? When should they expect to hear back? Some of those things having in your legal agreement just ensures that when the artist accepts it, that they are accepting those, specific terms. Intellectual property rights, so how are an artist's images and applications being used? Liability and indemnification clauses. This could be lean more towards, event participation contracts, but you can include that as well. And then termination and cancellation policies. So letting the artist know what would happen in the event that the event is, terminated or canceled. And that leads into the refund policy as well. But what can the artist expect in terms of communication and possible refunds? For the refund policy itself, it's important to include clear and concise policies around that. So you'll want to make sure you include defined eligibility criteria. This means, who is eligible for a refund and what circumstances. Are they able to be refunded if they're not selected? My guess is not, but you'll want to make sure that's included in there. Are there any deadlines for requesting refunds? So if they are eligible for a refund, when do they need to notify you by? Is there any deadlines after which they can't get a refund from you? Make sure you outline your refund process and timeline. So describe how an artist should request a refund, if it must be in writing, to a specific email address, requesting a refund, if they have to outline the reasons that meet the criteria. Make sure you include that information. And then again, what is the timeline for expecting a decision about whether or not they should receive the refund, or when could they expect the refund itself? That would include, getting information from ZAPP once we process refunds to let you know when the funds should be expected back into the artist's account. And then make sure you include clear cancellation and refund expectations. So this includes, what refunds are offered if the event is canceled versus if an artist cancels. So what are the expectations around refunds in the event of cancellations? And then what are expectations about full and partial refunds? Do you have any sort of policy that means that they can't get a full refund, or they can get a refund, but it's only for a certain amount after a certain time period? Make sure you outline any of those things that you have in the refund policy. And as you all know, we now have the refund policy field, and I'll show you in ZAPP here a little bit. Let's just go to our demo event. This was added back in May, and when you create a new event in ZAPP, you will now be required to include a separate refund policy. So we have that here. This is separate from the legal agreement that has always been in the event editor. This is only the case for events that were created after May 2nd. But basically, if you create events going forward, you'll now have to include your refund policy in a separate spot. This is because we want it to be transparent for artists. So when they go to review the information on the event, they can actually read the refund policy ahead of time. And it goes on the receipt for any payments. So artists can look at the refund policy after they've purchased the products and have reference to that. So that's a little bit about refund policies. Next, we'll get into chargebacks and payment disputes. So starting with a little bit of an overview. So what are chargebacks and payment disputes? So and for the purposes of this situation with ZAPP, anyone who makes a purchase with a credit card, debit card, or PayPal account on ZAPP can initiate a chargeback or a payment dispute. This happens when the buyer contacts their financial institution. This could be bank, credit card company, or PayPal itself if they have an account through it, to dispute the charge. And disputes can happen for a few different reasons. When they, initiate a chargeback, they have to, determine the reason why they're initiating the chargeback. And when we receive the notification, we're given usually one of three reasons. And I'll go over those now. So the first is fraud, which means the card holder or PayPal account holder does not recognize the charge, or their account had been compromised and this charge was included in their account recovery process. So this could be kind of one of two things. First, it could be that they just didn't recognize the charge. They're going through their statement and they don't know what ZAPP means, or it does say ZAPP software on the statement, but they might not recognize that, or they might not remember that it was related to an event itself. They may be expecting the payment to reflect the name of the event they applied to, not ZAPP, and they recognize that as fraud, so they initiate the chargeback. This could also happen if the artist did have fraud on their account. So, their credit card was stolen and fraudulent purchases were being made. As they're going through the purchases to determine which ones were fraudulent, they mixed up with ZAPP and put that in there as well. So in those cases, they're usually easy to resolve because we're able to, let them know whether or not it is a real purchase. And most of the time it is a real purchase because we don't ever really see people paying for ZAPP with a fraudulent payment method. The next reason is credit owed or not issued. So what this means is that the buyer wants a refund or has been unsuccessful in getting a refund. And then the other one is dissatisfaction. So if the artist is not happy with the outcome of the application or the jury process, maybe they're unhappy with something with the event, they may attempt to recoup the money they paid. So the second two are kind of related to each other, but the difference is that, in the dissatisfaction category, that means they didn't even try to reach out for a refund ahead of time. They just decided to dispute the charge and get that money back. So now we'll talk a little bit about how a chargeback is handled in ZAPP, and this might help you understand our process, the information that we're looking for when we are helping you handle a chargeback, and kind of provide some insight into preventing them. So the first thing that happens is if an artist initiates a chargeback, the ZAPP team is notified by our payment processors. So this could either come from PayPal, because we do accept PayPal payments, or from Braintree, and Braintree is our processor for credit cards. So if it's initiated through the credit card or bank, it will come to us from Braintree. Once we receive that notification, a member of the ZAPP support team will research the artist, the event, and the payment details. And we'll consider a lot of different things when we get this notification. And I'll kind of go through each of them so you can kind of understand what we're looking for. So first, we take a look at the time that we have to respond. This is given to us by either PayPal or Braintree, saying you have until this date to respond to this chargeback. We want to make sure that we're responding before that deadline. And it also helps us consider the priority of handling this chargeback to see, whether or not we have to respond quickly or not. We also look at the cost. So how much was this dispute for? We have to prioritize how we handle these things. And if disputes for $200 are coming in, we're going to prioritize those over ones that are, $25 for a jury fee. So we do look at that cost. And then obviously we'll look at the reason code that is given to us for that dispute. So that lets us know why they initiated the chargeback, which will be helpful in us responding. Then we research things like application status. So we look at whether or not the artist was invited to the event or withdrawn, or if they were invited and are in the confirmed status, maybe that lets us know that this is related to the participation in the event itself. So we try to take a look at that. We look at any email communications. So we see, have the ZAPP team communicated with the artist about a concern before? Have they communicated with the admin? Maybe we'll look at any email sent from the administrator to the artist through ZAPP to see, they were notified about something about the event and now they initiated the chargeback. That might clue us into what happened there. Then we also look at transaction history. This is related to a lot to those fraud chargeback reasons, because if we see that they had made other purchases, that tells us that it's likely not, a one-off fraudulent charge, or maybe they purchased two of the same products and they really just needed a refund on one of those products. Instead of initiating the chargeback, they could have just gotten a refund, but we'll look at that to see if maybe that's why. And then we'll also look at, what product was being purchased. Was it an application fee that maybe they're just unhappy they didn't get invited? Or was it a booth fee or something else that maybe needed to be refunded, or they couldn't participate in the event and couldn't get a refund, so they tried to initiate the chargeback instead. And then finally, we look at important dates. This helps us determine the reason for the chargeback based on where we are in the process. Is it after the jury deadline or the jury notification date, and that would tell us the artist wasn't happy with the result maybe? Or is it after the event date overall and they're just going through past charges to get anything off because they were unhappy with something with the event? So we just look at those to determine the timeline. So next, what we do is we contact necessary parties to gather more information about the reason for the dispute. Because we are this kind of third-party intermediary party between artists and you, the event organizers, we'll contact both to determine, what's happening here. We will let the artist know that we received the chargeback notification and ask them to provide more information. We will contact you, the administrator, to determine if you've had any prior contact with the artist, if you have any information to gather for us, and to let you know as well that this chargeback was initiated. We're going to handle it, but we might need info from you. And if we lose the chargeback, we need to charge you for that. So we contact everyone. And then we determine, after gathering more information, if the chargeback is justified. And we look at a few different things. We ask ourselves, based on the evidence we gathered, should the artist be refunded? Did the artist receive the product or service they paid for? Was the refund policy upheld? So that's another thing we look at. We go to the refund policy and say if the artist was entitled to one, or if everything was followed by the event, then the artist might not be eligible for a refund. And then, were those refund options clearly outlined? That's why it's also important to have clear policies, so that it really helps us in the event of a chargeback to be able to say and be on your side and say, hey, there's a policy, you didn't follow it, or, you aren't eligible for a refund. We're not going to, let you take this chargeback. And I'll get kind of into how we determine those next steps. Actually, I'll get into that now, which is once we've determined if the chargeback is justified, we go into hopefully resolve the dispute. And there's 3 things that can happen. One is we accept the dispute and the funds are returned to the artist or to the buyer. So we say, yep, the artist should have gotten a refund, and you might as well just give them the funds because they're entitled to it. Or the artist or the buyer itself closes the case. This is the most desirable outcome for everyone. This is where the artist says, oh yes, the purchase was legitimate, or they don't actually wish to pursue a refund anymore. Go ahead and close that chargeback. So the artist will actually have to do that. So if we are communicating with the artist and we say, hey, this was actually just from ZAPP because you paid this jury fee for this event, they can go in and be like, to their bank and say, this was actually a legitimate charge and I should be able to pay this. And then the third thing is to fight it. Obviously, this one's a little bit tricky, but if we choose to fight, that means that we, the client, do not agree that the fund should be refunded, and we'll prepare evidence to support this claim. So we'll gather all the information we've gathered from the artist and the administrator and from ZAPP as well. We'll create a document for the processor, either PayPal or Braintree, outlining the reasons why we believe that the artist should not be entitled to the funds. And we, gather these evidence and submit it to either PayPal or Braintree, and they determine whether or not the artist should get the funds back. So once we are notified of the outcome of the dispute, whether that be the artist closing it, or let's say we did fight it and PayPal or Braintree decided in the favor of the buyer, we will communicate the outcome to the necessary parties and then arrange payment recollection if applicable. So we will charge the event for the funds of a lost chargeback, either by holding them from your next payment or issuing an invoice. So that's a little bit about the ZAPP process for how we handle the chargebacks. Again, it's kind of nice that ZAPP is here to be able to provide that kind of mediation for you, because we are we have the payment processors, we collect those payments, we help you with these chargebacks and payment disputes. But it's good to understand the reason for why we look for certain information and why it's good to have clear and concise refund policies to help us in that case. So let's talk a little bit more about chargebacks and what you can do and why it's important to try to prevent chargebacks. So possible consequences of chargebacks for events, the time-consuming process. Not only do you have to respond to us in our requests for more information, you may have to communicate with the artist and address their concerns. And this just takes more time out of everyone's day. So it can be time-consuming. It can also be costly if the dispute is lost. Depending where you are in the application cycle, you may not be able to sell those products to another artist and recoup those funds. So depending on the timing of everything, you may lose out on some money. And it could damage reputation or strain relationships with artists or even ZAPP, if they occur frequently, basically. So, if a high number of chargebacks are coming in, that could signal potential issues with refund policies, with the event organization, customer service, or the product itself. And then, just kind of negative reviews or complaints that are associated with chargebacks can help, be a cause in those strained relationships. So let's talk about, proactive measures and the importance of preventing chargebacks. It's kind of the opposite of all these things, but financial stability, excessive chargebacks can strain cash flow, increase operating costs, and potentially lead to financial losses. Customer trust and satisfaction, chargebacks can be time consuming and frustrating for both customers, artists, and businesses or events. By proactively addressing potential issues, you can prevent chargebacks and build stronger relationships with artists. This fosters trust, loyalty, and overall satisfaction. And then, risk mitigation and fraud protection. Chargebacks can be initiated due to fraudulent activities, such as unauthorized transactions or identity theft. Like I said, we rarely, if ever, actually see true cases of fraud with ZAPP payments itself. But if you are able to identify patterns or detect suspicious activities, this could help you take preventive actions to mitigate risk and protect against fraud. They not only reduce chargebacks, but enhance the overall security of your process. So, what about some strategies for event organizers to prevent chargebacks? First, you just want to make sure you're providing sufficient information for applicants. So this includes providing detailed information. Make sure that you clearly communicate all relevant details about the festival or the fair, including product prices, event dates, locations, entry requirements, and refund policies. Make sure this information is easily accessible on your website, on your ZAPP event details page, anywhere else you have this information listed. This also includes setting clear expectations, so outline terms and conditions of purchases, including refund and cancellation policies. Make sure customers understand the process and any associated fees or deadlines for refunds. And then maintain open lines of communication. So make sure you're promptly responding to artist inquiries, addressing concerns, and providing assistance as needed. Of course, ZAPP helps with that, but artists, if they come to you, you'll want to make sure you're open and transparent to help resolve issues before it can escalate to a chargeback. Strategies also include proactive customer support and dispute resolution. So just kind of going off that last bullet point a little bit more. Making sure you're responsive, so providing easily accessible customer support channels, making sure you have an email that artists can go to, and you're providing, customer support or artist support on a regular basis to prevent chargebacks. And then in the case of customer disputes or concerns, you'll want to make sure you offer a mediation process to resolve issues amicably and prevent chargebacks that might be a result of not being able to resolve disputes or dissatisfied artists. And then maybe also offer refunds as part of that where applicable, depending on the situation. You might not want it to escalate to a chargeback, so you'd want to offer a refund instead. And then just overall track artist feedback and satisfaction. So if you're regularly gathering information from artists about their experience and their satisfaction, you can hopefully identify areas for improvement. By actively listening to artists and addressing their concerns, you can improve overall satisfaction and minimize chargebacks. And then another strategy is just making sure you're establishing a robust documentation process. So organize your email and make sure you record phone or verbal communications written down. We may need you to refer to these when we gather evidence for payment disputes. So having record of conversations that were made, especially when decisions were being made about a refund or maybe an exception that was made for an artist, having a record of those written would be very helpful when we have to come to you and possibly, settle a dispute. And then, know that you can also use tags and flags on the applications in ZAPP to make comments or to make notes about applications. Maybe if I'm going to go back into ZAPP here, you can, if I go into some applications here, you can definitely create tags on the application. Maybe you have a tag for, just chargeback. So you know that that artist had initiated a chargeback. Possibly their status is not confirmed, but is in withdrawn or something like that. You can also create flags to note that something was up with that artist and you needed to follow up or something like that. So there's a couple things you can do for that in ZAPP to organize it. And that's a little bit about, preventing chargebacks. Some additional things, kind of reiterating some of these, but just, best practices for handling the chargebacks. In general, we've got some do's and don'ts for you. Make sure you do act promptly. Make sure to respond to ZAPP support team's questions so that we can respond to the payment processor within the designated time frame. If we don't respond on time, this could result in an automatic chargeback acceptance, meaning we would automatically lose. So we want to make sure we're responding promptly. Do understand the reason, so review the chargeback reasons that we provide you. This could help you gather information and evidence to prevent future occurrences. Maintain professional communication, so communicate with the ZAPP team and artists in a calm, professional manner. Avoid using aggressive or defensive language. This could escalate the situation, and no one wants that. And make sure you provide detailed documentation. Like I was saying, including all the relevant information will be really helpful. This includes order details, receipts, artist communication records, and refund policies. Again, ZAPP will help you collect a lot of this information, but there may be holes that we need you to provide for us. So having clear and comprehensive documentation can help strengthen your case. Don't ignore chargebacks. Again, it's kind of do act promptly, but ignoring chargebacks can lead to automatic acceptance, and you'll lose the opportunity to dispute the claim. ZAPP team obviously will not ignore chargebacks, but when we reach out to you, you'll want to make sure you respond to us. Don't dispute without evidence. Pretty self-explanatory there. That's why it's good to have detailed documentation. If you try to dispute it without evidence, they're likely not going to suggest that or decide in your favor. And then don't engage in confrontations with customers, avoid engaging in arguments or disputes, and maintain a respectful tone in all interactions so that it doesn't escalate it to something further. And then best practices also includes collaborating with ZAPP support for resolution. So, provide us the requested information that we need that will help strengthen your case and increase the likelihood of a successful outcome. Stay in communication with us, so make sure that you're providing updates or checking in with us about things. We can also help you provide updates and advice and further assistance as needed, so keep those communication lines open. And then from our perspective, make sure you pay those lost funds if required. We may need to invoice you the cost of a lost chargeback if you don't have enough funds in your account for us to deduct from. So just please pay this invoice in a timely manner so we can close the case on our end and maintain a good relationship with your event. Finally, here, I just have some thoughts about, learning from chargeback experiences and implementing improvements in the long term. Again, analyzing chargeback patterns can help you identify any recurring reasons for disputes and can help you pinpoint areas of improvement. Maybe you need to adjust your refund policy to be more clear, things like that. Similarly, identify those root causes so that you can make sure you have complete event details and expectations. Understanding these causes of chargebacks can help you implement targeted improvements. You can also enhance the quality of the artist experience. So focusing on improving the quality of your event for artists, improving those, customer support channels can help you reduce the likelihood of artist dissatisfaction or disputes. Address any known issues and prioritize satisfaction as they arise. If an artist comes to you with a concern about something and maybe they are asking for a refund, resolving it at that stage before it escalates to a payment dispute or chargeback is definitely helpful. Again, revise refund and cancellation policies as needed. Make sure they're aligned with your industry standards. Just check in and see if there's anything that needs to be adjusted year over year. This could help reduce customer confusion or frustration. And then finally, strengthen communication and support. So provide helpful customer support channels, ensure customers or artists can reach out to you to address concerns or inquiries, again, reducing the likelihood of chargebacks. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you learned a little bit about understanding legal agreements and refund policies, kind of at a overview. And I hope you learned a little bit about how ZAPP handles payment disputes. Maybe you can gain some insight on what you can do to make your policies more clear so you can prevent chargebacks in the future. If you have questions specific to your own event, or maybe you have a pending chargeback and you have a question about that, please email the ZAPP team at zapphelp@westaff.org, and they can help you with that directly. So thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to having you at our webinar next month.